The music for Gone Home was mainly composed over two separate periods, roughly a year apart. A version of Part 1 of the game had to be ready by October 2012 for submission to the 2013 Independent Games Festival, so I did all the Part 1 audio logs primarily that September. The following summer I did another round of logs for the second half of the game, as well as some Part 1 revisions in the ambient exploration tracks. One really nice side effect of the long gap between composition sessions, as well as the structure of writing music that is very literally accompanying a story, was that I ended up hitting on pretty different ideas and approaches over time as I got further along in Sam's story. The original sketches I did had mainly electric piano sounds, which are warmer and more naturalistic than synthesizers and other electronics instruments. As Sam and Lonnie's story developed more, though, I started to bring in acoustic guitar as well. It seemed like an appropriate way for the music to build up some more familiar, natural elements, somewhat echoing Sam coming into her own. Eventually, it became a really tonal element of the score. After that emerged, I started to more carefully control the instrumentation for the various main categories of log subject matter, including Sam's self-reflections, Sam and Lonnie, Sam and her parents, and even Sam and Daniel. Some of those have their own melodies and themes as well. That wasn't really a grand plan from the start, and I don't expect everyone to really notice it, but it became one of my favorite things about working on this score.
So earlier in an earlier version of the story in Gone Home, Sam and Lonnie got caught together, and Lonnie's dad was like an asshole about it and threatened to send Lonnie to live with her mom in Florida. And we cut that. It was too melodramatic and it wasn't really interesting. It was an external force that was acting on them, which I wasn't super excited about in practice and so on and so forth. But it caused there to be this concept of Lonnie's mom living in Florida, which...
Florida is, of course, the worst place that you can live.
Well, let's not assume. But that said, it's the other side of the country, and it's totally so foreign from Oregon and everything. Also, it's where I grew up.
Yeah, that was.
So
I was kidding you.
So yes, the reason I think that Lonnie's mom lives in Florida is that I grew up in Florida, and I moved from Florida to Oregon when I was like 19, and I've been back to visit, but you know. If someone were to say to me, "Hey Steve, do you want to go back and live in Florida?" I would take a sheet of notebook paper and I would write "no" on it, as big as you can get, and
with
hand it back to
gravestones.
you. There would be knives, there would be gravestones, there would be
Dead
lightning,
face. Yeah.
Big X's in the eyes, vampire teeth for some reason.
I was largely unfamiliar with Florida, and my family started going there every once in a while, or when I was like in high school for Christmas, because my mom hates being cold. And
Pick the wrong goddamn place to live, Mrs. Zamanja.
Yeah, well, you know. But anyway, the only thing that I remember basically is that everybody had lawn flamingos, and we went around Christmas, so I remember hearing on the radio multiple times dogs barking Christmas carols. That's Florida.
Florida sounds cooler than I remember it being.
In my head, that's Florida, right there.
All of the sliding doors that you see in the game are actually, from a code perspective, drawers. When I made a thing that could slide along a track like that, for the purpose of making drawers, Steve took it and, as designers are wont to do, used it for his own purposes and came up with sliding doors in our game.
Writing Sam was a unique challenge, just in the sense of, on the one hand, it was very much from my personal experience because it's about being a teenager and my memories from that time, you know, as an individual, but also who Sam was and what her experience was, came about as a result of kind of problem solving that we were doing, that Carla and I were doing, just figuring out what the story and what the conflict in the story was going to be. So, you know, by the time we figured out this was all going to take place in one house, and the conflict was going to be between the members of this family, and it had to be kind of irreconcilable differences that would cause serious drama between the members of this family, we started thinking, what form could that take? Could it be that the teenager of the family falls in love with somebody that they're not supposed to, and the parents don't agree? And what is the contemporary version of that? And so, we at some point decided that we were going to write Sam as a gay character who had fallen in love with another girl, and what conflict would that cause within the family, right?
And we were excited about that opportunity just because of the paucity of that kind of narrative in games. And I remember when we came up with that concept, just being like, oh man, this is gonna be good, we actually get to do this, which is really cool. But anyway, we actually we had to do a lot of work to make it plausible. Right.
Well, because the other side of it is that I'm the writer on the game, and on the one hand, a lot of teenage experience is universal, but I also at some point just had that very clear realization of, okay, I have just signed up for writing a gay teenage girl. Two out of the three aspects of that character are not something that I've actually lived through. And so it was impressed upon me, especially like when I was working at Irrational, how important research was to getting your fiction right, whether it's very practical terms like how something works mechanically, to what the characterization of the individuals in your story might be. And so my process was reading a lot of blogs about people's actual experiences growing up being gay and being female, and reading fiction and nonfiction about people's experience, and doing original interviews with people that I knew in my life, and asking them about what they remember about growing up with these experiences, and being able to actually, ask follow-up questions. And I'm really grateful to all the people who have shared their experiences through writing, and who were willing to share their experiences with me, personally, talking to me into a microphone so that I could refer to it later, which is just a huge leap for someone to take, to talk about their own, coming of age and all of those very personal experiences. But, I couldn't have gone into writing this character with just saying, well, I'll just assume that I'll do an okay job and write it however it seems like I should. And instead saying, you have to take this seriously, and you have to actually reach out to people who have lived it, so that when you're writing this character, it represents the experience of people like her in a way that is plausible and respectful and
authentic.
Yeah, that represents them in a way that doesn't cheapen the experience that they've had by relying on cliches or just kind of your expectations as an outsider.
It's really about the ideals that we were trying to get across in our music. I think that the move to equality for women and for everyone in the U.S. is something that we all want to be a part of, right? And we used Riot Girl, and we used music as the tool for that, and that. But it's really, to me, it's about equality for everyone. That I think is the key, and that's why young people really feel passionate, and they listen to the music and they hear that passion, and that's what they connect with.
So I'm Sarah Argidale. This is my salad dressing, named for my experience with being in Russia and that being what everyone knows me for. I studied Russian in college, and I lived there for about a year, teaching English when I finished school, and it was a cool thing that happened in my life. So I am a reader of the Idle Thumbs podcast, and I guess that's how I met everyone at the Fulbright Company and kind of inserted myself into their lives. Gone Home team, the Fulbright team, was nice enough to put a little token in the game for me, and it's pretty cool.
When you put out any sort of content about your game online, whether it's screenshots or whether it's gameplay or anything along those lines, you're sort of at the mercy of the internet, and you sort of want to see what people are going to respond to, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully it's positive. But we put out the screenshot a while back of the TV room, among other screenshots, and there's lots of wonderful comments, and I was really happy about that. But one of the comments that I saw a couple of times was people talking about how greasy this pizza box was. Something I hadn't noticed, so I went back and I checked it. It's a very greasy pizza box. Maybe Sam's into deep dish pizza, who knows? But I'm glad we didn't change it. I'm glad we kept it just as corrosive as it always was. Like it.
For a long time, the kitchen was not going to be mid-renovation the way that it is. And it's one of those things that I think that necessity, a production constraint, actually made this part of the house better than it would have been if we could have just done whatever we wanted. Because for a long time we were like, okay, it's just going to be a kitchen, and so we're going to need a bunch of food, which we ended up making, and we're going to need a bunch of appliances, and we're going to need a bunch of utensils and a block with kitchen knives in it and all the kind of stuff that would be in a kitchen. And at some point we just realized we didn't have the bandwidth to, like, of all the rooms in a house, the kitchen, I think, has the most just one-off unique thingies in it, because there's all these kitchen appliances and stuff that appear nowhere else in a house. And so at some point we just realized it wasn't going to make sense for us to try to portray that in a literal way. And so I just had the idea, what if I just tore the place apart, and the cabinets were sitting on the ground and the counters were laid up against the wall, and it's an old house, and maybe before the family moved in the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 50s, and so they decided to redo the kitchen, and they're in the middle of that when you get here. I think that that's hopefully more visually interesting than playing it straight would have been, and B, it allowed us to make this feel like a believable space in a way that we just wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Oh, you found an Easter egg!
Who found it?
You found it! This is the best! You looked up! No one in a first-person game looks up!
Because there's no rewards to looking up.
Because it's hard to look up.
Also, you weren't allowed to look up in, like,
Wolfenstein? And Doom, I guess. It shot higher if there was an enemy higher.
Oh, yeah.
If you go get something recyclable from the recycle bin, I made it so that when you throw it way further than a normal thing, and you can knock the basketball out of the rafters and then carry it to Sam's room, and then when you make a basket, either by just throwing it through or by dunking,
you get a present.
You get a present, which is pictures of our cats showing up on the television.
And cats that we know.
Cats and friends of cats.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
And we also we did a final wrap up, like a pickup voice recording session with Sarah Grayson, and we just went in there to re-record a couple of lines, because we wanted to go a different direction with them after we had put them in the game and listened to them and everything, and we had some extra time, and it was like, what are we going to do with this extra time? And we didn't know, and then we were like, we did want to make an Easter egg. What if you just reread one of the audio diaries, but instead of words, you said meow? And she was like, okay.
If you say so.
So we went back in.
Game
and
as
she was
hell.
a champ.
Yeah.
And did it perfectly, and
did not break face.
No, and Josh, our audio engineer, I think, just had no idea what the hell was going on.
He was kind of off. It was good shit.
And yeah, at the end of the audio diary, when you make the basket in Sam's room, you can hear from outside the booth us starting to laugh before the audio cuts off.
It's a beauty.
Yeah, no, Easter eggs are fun, and again, congratulations for looking up.
definitely the second half was where a lot more of the emotional weight in the character came out, and that was a lot to handle, but a lot of fun to do too, because I've really not gotten to do a character that actually was so, I guess, emotionally real and so human. You know, it's sort of, you're not doing some commercial selling you thing, or not doing some sort of sci-fi fantasy world sort of story. It was very realistic and very relatable, and you sort of realize that the character's someone that you could know or that you could have been, you know, when you were younger, which I really liked. It was very exciting. The whole experience has been really good. So that was probably the hardest one we had to record. It was part of the second batch of recording we did, and so I had the script a few days before we did the recording to kind of read through it all and get a feel for where the story was going. And then we'd met for lunch to go over everything and see if I had any questions before we went into the studio. And I just right away admitted, like, yep, some part of this script here, like, I'll be honest, one of these totally had me crying, like, straight up, totally couldn't help it. Figuring, like, yeah, I had my cry out, it was good, I'll be fine, get to the recording, it'll be good, you know, get it out of your system. And as soon as, like, I read the first word, I was like, no, oh God, I'm gonna start crying again, it's gonna be great. I'm like, hey, I'm a professional voice actress in the studio, I'm going to totally bawl all over your lines, and it's going to sound ridiculous and terrible, and we're going to have to do the take again, and it's going to sound even worse, because now I'm crying. So it actually ended up being one take. Really, it's cathartic in a way for me, I think, because it's really, how do I put it? It's really me talking to, like, specific people. I knew it was going to happen again. I knew it. It's the stupid writing being so on point. Which is great, I mean, you know, definite praise for the character build-up at this point, because I just become so connected with her, and making those parallels all the way along. And then you get to this point where it's like, I know exactly how you feel. Like, I know exactly what you're going through. I mean, it was completely authentic. I mean, I've enjoyed people commenting on the connection they've had to the emotion that's in the character. And this is always the diary I think of, because it's the one that it most got me.
I'd already played through the first full half of Gone Home before I started composing any music, which was really important to understand how the game felt and played and looked. But I didn't get a build of the complete game until I'd already been delivered the Part 2 audio logs, and then ended up not playing any of the second half of the game until it was fully complete and I'd written all the music. This wasn't originally my intention, but it meant I ended up fully immersed in Sam's story, essentially to the exclusion of all the other subplots of the game, which are not accompanied by specific music. I don't know if that was objectively the right call or not as the composer, but it definitely made me feel very connected to that character. I probably heard Sarah delivering Sam's story dozens or maybe hundreds of times over. It also meant I didn't actually know the literal implications of the ending of Sam's story, so I was imagining all kinds of potential endings that ended up being a lot darker than what you see when you finally do reach the attic. So as a player, when I did complete the game, I was pretty relieved.
Really early on, I thought it would be, like, something that I thought would be engaging about Gone Home would just be finding notes and scraps in unexpected places and being able to, like, you know, zoom in really far and find something that's tucked away in someone's pocket or whatever. And yeah, finding a note that was in someone's pocket that had gone through the dryer, I thought would just be a cool image. And so we were always going to do this, and we ended up making it this specific note from Lonnie to Sam, which it wasn't this for a long time.
Yeah, we had a few different go-rounds.
It was the one that's in the garbage can in the garage was here for a long time, and this one didn't exist, and there was no note in the garbage can in the garage. But yeah, I think that this note this is I think the last note that went into the game.
It was really late.
And like the last new content, you know, that went into the game, because we did our final like pre-release playtest, and there were people that were kind of like, I felt like Lonnie's decision came out of nowhere at the end, and you know, I was like, why, you know, why is that? And I think it's because Lonnie had never gotten to say her piece, you know, and never gotten to have that moment of saying, I wish things were different and I want to be with you and I don't want to have to go away. But we've just made the assumption that that's how it's got to be. To give you some context for her, when she actually had to confront it, saying like, you know what, I can't live with it being that way. And so this was her chance to speak just from her own perspective about why she felt like she had no choice in the matter. And then what she was deciding against when she, you know, changed her mind when she finally had to like ship out. Didn't really give Kate very specific direction for this. She gave us some reference for us to approve and everything, but when we put it into the game, again, not a request from us at all, looking at the struts and the shape of the windows and how it's this sort of deco metal structure with water outside of it, I was just like, welcome to Rapture.
Oh, I know, it's so true.
It almost feels
really
like
is true.
an intentional reference, if only it were intentional. So you want to talk about this fucking jazz mug?
Nobody wants to talk about the jazz mug.
Well,
It's
except
the
for Carla.
worst. I hate it. It's the worst.
that was such a common theme
Yeah.
when we were like approving assets or making stuff visually for Gone Home, is just like, oh my god, that's hideous. I fucking hate it. We're putting it in the game.
Yeah,
because like
so
just
much
like
of that.
awful '90s furniture and like the
we see it in a secondhand store or like.
or you
just
see it
on
in the
internet,
Sears catalog we
yeah,
bought,
that's
and it's just
true.
like, there's
We
so
just
many
be like,
fucking
oh,
ruffles on it. I want to puke. Like the wicker furniture in Mom and Dad's room. It's
right.
like, that's fucking hideous.
We need it.
The fact that there are speedruns for our game makes me really happy, and the fact that, you know, that the any percent speedrun, aka you don't have to pick up anything, just get to the end as fast as possible, has basically been optimized to, I think, 47 or 48 seconds. Even just watching that speedrun is really fun because you see the player optimize, like, for instance, the fastest speedruns, they don't turn on any lights because it would take a fraction of a second to turn towards the light switch and turn it on and then turn back to the direction they wanted to go. And, you know, they just kind of, like, strafe past things and don't even change direction to move through the house. And then, yeah, the 100% Diaries speedrun is even more interesting because players use that secret knowledge to play the game totally out of order based on a strategy for, okay, what's the most efficient way to go to these 24 points in the game?
Like spatially, so it's like this visit, it's the salesman, problem or something, where it has to go to all these different points, and what's the best way to do it. It's cool.
Yeah, and so seeing someone think about the house in a totally different way and a strategic way that is about this player created challenge, that says, oh, okay, if I go into the basement first, then back out and into the east wing, then don't even go into the west wing until after, and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool to see that stuff evolve, and I'm really glad that we didn't make it so, for instance, you had to read the note about the secret door before you could even click on the secret door, because it would have shut down so many of those opportunities for people to play in interesting ways and express their mastery over the space that they've gained by playing the game.
Challenges.
You want to talk about a place for Christmas Duck?
This is where Christmas Duck goes.
Oh, it's Christmas Duck's little house.
It's his little house. That's where he goes. He goes into it.
There was something that I always assumed would happen. I know that some people did do it because we got tweets, like on the day of release or whatever, of people referring to this.
Right.
But kind of based on the gnome in Half-Life 2 Episode 2 or whatever, and just a general, I think, instinct to take the first kind of personified thing that you encounter and
drag it around the house with you.
yeah, like try to take it to the end of take it all the way there with you or whatever. I knew that some people were going to take Christmas Duck all the way from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, and that we needed to pay that off somehow. I used the putback system that in almost all cases is just used to, okay, you pick up a Kleenex box and now you can put it back where you got it. But in reality, I can put one of those putback triggers anywhere in the game that I want. So there's one putback trigger for Christmas Duck where you initially pick him up, and then I put another putback trigger for Christmas Duck here. But yeah, if you bring Christmas Duck up here, you get Katie's interaction prompt that says, "There you go, Christmas Duck," and you put him back in his little nest, and he gets to go back to his home at the end of the game.
Good old Christmas Duck.
I think this is one where I love the way the music makes it so uplifting. Because it starts out in this very, sad point where it's sort of just like, you kind of don't know what, I don't know, to me it was very emotionally ambiguous in a sense. I mean, she's saying like, oh my god, I can't believe it, like something's happened, something's gone wrong. And as she kind of unravels the story about how she missed the first two calls, which then take you right back to one of the first things you probably do when you get in the house was find the voice recorder. So I love how it loops it around, and then it starts building this positive feeling of like how this isn't the end, and we are going to see each other again, and there's this wonderful elation that she sort of dawns on in a funny way, and that it's just it's so hopeful, and it's really nice to connect to that and just try and express a little bit of levity after so much weight has built up over the course of her life in this little window.
It's one of those things where we had always wanted to, we had wanted to pay off Sam's darkroom by letting you go in it and see photos that she had taken, and B, this started from a point of me just being like, oh, we'll end the game the same way we ended Minerva's Den, it'll be fine. But between those two things, we initially figured we were signing up for photos that would have taken a lot of time and effort to make, of like a photo strip of the two of them in a photo booth, which would mean like let's do 4 pairs of photo painted photos of these characters, and just like pictures of them in the mirror together, and all of this very high cost facial rendering basically for Carla to do, because we had we had this style that was like, okay, you do photo collage and then you paint it over to make it look consistent, and it's a lot of work, and it's hard to get the pieces and the lighting and the poses and everything looking right.
I'm just not that much of a pro in order to be able to do that fast, and so it would have been months.
Yeah, so we have the one very close-up photo of Lonnie's eye, and then we just brainstormed what are evocative images of the two of them and their life that we could create without having to show their faces a bunch. And I think that, like so many things, taking a step back and only, you know, seeing the implication of these characters is probably a lot more powerful than if we had just made a bunch of pictures of them looking at the camera.
Being less literal is definitely more meaningful in this particular case.
Yeah.
To the extent that I remember when I took these holding hands photos with Rachel. I don't know. I took a dozen, something like that, different versions of them, and then I was going through them afterward to try and find the one that I wanted to use to Photoshop in the letters on the heart and everything. And I found myself thinking, oh, these are all so sweet. I'm like, I had just taken them 10 minutes ago with my roommate, and it was just like, somehow this here is more evocative and meaningful than a happy face, I guess. But anyway, yeah. I was fooled by my own shtick, which is extremely silly.
So this is the last room in the game, or at least the last room chronologically in the story.
You need it.
You did it! Yeah, this is where you find Sam's journal that you have been hearing diary entries from. And it's revealed, or I guess implied retroactively, that, you know, the game has been taking place in a flashback, basically, and Katie read Sam's diary that was addressed to her and is now thinking back to what she saw in the house. So thanks for playing through with commentary mode and listening to us and Yonaman and Kate and Sarah Grayson and Chris Remo and Corin Tucker from Heavens to Betsy and Slater Kinney, who, again, thank you to her for taking her time to record some of her recollections and thoughts for this. But yeah, just thanks for playing, and we hope that you got something good out of all of our jibber jabber.
It's okay if you didn't.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye. We love you.
Yeah, I guess.